It's time again to hear from the Creek Road Baptist pulpit.
Star is just before dawn, the narrow gate.
This weekly sermon podcast comes to you from Sharonville and the hills surrounding Cincinnati, Ohio.
Down your soul at Jesus' feet, the darkest hour.
And here now is Pastor Dave.
John chapter 8. John chapter 8 is another one of those rather lengthy chapters in the Gospel of John, and there's so much material here, especially about knowing. We've been doing a thread of sermons following the knowing and not knowing in the Gospel of John. And today we come to chapter 8, and there are a multitude of places here in chapter 8 where we could just lift out a portion about people knowing and not knowing, Jesus' knowing and the disciples not knowing, or the Jews not knowing, and the revelation that comes through Christ. I want to take a passage of Scripture today that is very, 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 very familiar to you. As a matter of fact, it's probably one of those that you may not realize that it comes from John chapter 8, and that is verses 31 and 32. So if you have the 8th chapter open there, please look at verses 31 and 32. But before I go any further, I must give just a moment to say that probably the most significant I am statement in the Gospel of John is found here in the 8th chapter in verse 58. If you look at verse 58, and my text is not verse 58 today, but I can't have you in John 8 without reading verse 58. Verse 58 says, Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. One of the most significant statements of Christ in the Gospel of John, right here in chapter 8. Jesus, of course, knowing who he is and where he's from, announces to the Jews that he is I am. Before Abraham was, I am. And then, of course, verse 59, they're going to stone him. You know, that's it. They've had enough. They've heard enough. Now they're going to do away with him. Of course, Jesus, as he's done so often, he moves his way through the midst of them, and they're unable to do it because his time has not yet come yet. So we're doing this. We're following this thread of knowing and not knowing throughout the entire Gospel of John. We come today to verses 31 and 32. Let me just read those for you. Beginning with verse 31. Then Jesus said to those Jews which believed on him, If you continue in my word, then are you my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Two men had an argument, and to settle the matter, they went to a Sufi judge for arbitration. The plaintiff made his case. He was very eloquent. He was very persuasive. His reasoning was flawless. And when he finished, the judge nodded in approval and said, That's right, that's right. Well, on hearing this, the defendant jumped up and said, Whoa, now wait a minute, judge. You haven't even heard my side of the case yet. So the judge told the defendant to state his case. And he too was very eloquent, very well spoken, very persuasive. And when he finished, the judge said, That's right, that's right. Well, on hearing this, the clerk of courts, he jumped up and he said, Now wait a minute, judge, they both can't be right. And the judge looked at the clerk of courts and he said, That's right, that's right. They should have found a different judge, I think. Yeah. So this judge has a problem with something we're going to talk about today. And that is the title of the message, Knowing the Truth. We've talked about all kinds of knowing. And today we're going to talk about knowing the truth. My professor used to say that Hebrew is written from the right to the left, but it's explained from the left to the right. When we read the Scripture, we read from the beginning to the end of a passage, But today I'm going to start the explanation from the end of the passage and work my way back to the beginning. So, if you'll look at verse 32, let's read that verse one more time. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So let's start with verse 32 and talk a little bit about truth. I brought with me today my ruler. This is a ruler that is in my house. It's a yardstick, and we use these for all kinds of things. Matter of fact, Denise used to come back from the farm show with rulers. Every year we had rulers because they would give them away as, it would have the company's name on it, and she would always bring a yardstick back. And this is one of those, I think, this is Champion. This is a Sharonville ruler yardstick. So I want to talk to you about inches this morning. Not too long ago, I had a problem with my wiper blades on my car. And I said to myself, I'm tired of not being able to see out my window when it rains. And it had gotten really bad. You know how you put that off? Does anybody else ever do that? You start doing this when it rains. And then when it gets so bad, and I don't know why, but on my cars, it's always the driver's side that gets the worst first. And so you start doing this so that you can kind of see. Well, that's what had happened with my wiper blades. They were horrible. I mean, they had dissolved into nothing but rubber mush on those blades. And so I said, by golly, I'm going to go buy me new wiper blades. How do I buy new wiper blades? Well, I know I have to know how long my wiper blades are. So, enter the yardstick. I went outside, took the driver's side blade off, laid it down on my yardstick, and it came to 20 inches. So I had I needed to purchase a 20-inch blade for my car. So I walked down to the parts house. And I walked in the parts house, and the technician greeted me. And he said, "Sir, how can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I need 2 wiper blades for my car." And he said to me, "How long are they?" And I said, 20 inches. And he said, "Come this way." And we walked over to this long, huge display. It was about as long as that pew right there, full of wiper blades. I've never seen so many wiper blades in one spot in all of my life. And he said, "Would you like a composite blade or would you like a traditional blade?" And I, not knowing what a composite blade was, said to give me the traditional blade. And so that divided now the long display into half. He said, "Here are our traditional blades." And he said, "Now you have to choose between the maker of these blades." And I already had in mind the kind of blade, who made the blade that I wanted. And I told him the name of the company. He said, "Here they are right here, sir. Here's 20 inches. I'll grab 2 of those, and we'll just walk up to the counter, and I'll check you out." We walked up to the counter, checked me out, went home, put the blades on my car, and now my wife's happy because she can see when she drives. And I'm happy, too, because I don't have to listen to that thing screech, 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 and not be able to see, It's bad enough when it makes noise, but it's even worse when it makes noise and you can't see. It's like it's laughing at you, But now that doesn't happen because I was able to use my ruler. So, inches. Did knowing the truth about inches, because I used my yardstick and it has the inch marks on it, did knowing the truth about how long an inch was set me free? And we're going to apply verse 32 here to my illustration. Did it set me free from decayed wiper blades? Yes, it did. Because I know that this inch is the same inch that I needed to know at the parts house. So I looked at my ruler, and here's an inch, and I put it up against my blade, and I found out that it was 20 of those inches long. And I knew that because I knew how long an inch was, and I knew that I needed 20 of them for a wiper blade, that I could get myself a wiper blade at the parts house. And I walked down there, bought the blade, went home, and now those nasty old wiper blades are in the garbage can. No more. It freed me, knowing the truth about inches, freed me from decayed wiper blades. It allowed me to purchase the correct refill blades for my vehicle. Okay, one more illustration. I brought my mandolin today. Let me play you a note. That is a G. That note, that tone right there is a G. That sound is the same, and it's called a G no matter where you are in the world. Now, my mandolin playing cousin in China will have a different word in Mandarin for that, or Cantonese, whatever he speaks, and he might not call it a G, but if I went over there and he played, I would say, oh, you're playing a G, and he would nod his head and I would play a G, because that tone has been standardized. We know that's what we call that note. And because I know that that's a G, and I know a little bit about the scale, then I've suddenly realized that if I go 8 places, there's another G. So now I know not only the G, but I know the G scale. And if I know the G scale, then I can play a little ditty in G. And suddenly, not only is the scale available to me because I know the note G, but I can play a little something in that scale. So knowing the note has freed me to be able to play something in the G scale, because I know the truth about this sound. Now, there are lots of other sounds on this instrument. There's a G here, there's a G here, I've showed you the G here, and there's a G way up here. So there's 4 right there that I just showed us, 4 G notes, all of them in scales, all of them, once you know the note, the scale, then suddenly the whole thing opens up, because then you can just kind of play around with those scales and those notes. So knowing the note, because the note is standardized, the note is the same, it's called a G no matter where you go, no matter what language it's in, that tone has been designated as a G everywhere around the world. And so I can play it. And when I meet my Chinese cousin who plays the mandolin, he and I could sit down and we could play something together in the key of G. Okay, that's just kind of a funny little illustration to tell you about truth. That note, that sound is true. It's a G. Now, I don't know, I didn't tune it before I did this. That may be a little off. It may be a little sharp or a little flat. In this cold room, it may be a little sharp. But it's true. This inch on my ruler is true. It's always going to be an inch. It doesn't change no matter what. That's always going to be the case. Okay. So truth is freeing. It frees me, but only when there's a standard. So let's go back to the parts house for a second. What if I decided I'm sick and tired of my decayed wiper blades that laugh at me every time I turn them on? They don't work. They don't even try to work. They just make a lot of noise and a mess on my windshield. And I grab my yardstick and I measure and I find 20 inches. It's 20 inches long that I need. And I go down to the part house. And the man at the part house says, well, what do you need? And I say, I need wiper blades. And he says, okay, how long are they? And I say, 20 inches. And he pulls out his yardstick. But his yardstick shows 20 inches down here somewhere, not up here. He's got a different measure than I do. And what if not only does the man at the part house have a different standard for inches than I do, what if the manufacturer of the blades has a different standard for inches than I do, or the man at the parts house? And what if the auto manufacturer has a different standard for inches than the blade maker and the technician at the house and me? What if all four of us have different